One of the best things about setting up a new journal or planner is all of the potential that comes with it. Getting it set up for the year or period ahead is essentially an invitation to think about what we want life to look like. What goals and projects do we want to commit to? Or really, how do we want things to change? How do we want to better our lives? These are the kind of questions that I like to ask myself before any new journal setup, and this one is no exception. While in this video, I'm setting up my new notebook to organize everything that life throws at me in the quarter ahead, stay tuned for how you could win your own notebook to help you organize your life too. But flipping on into this one, rather than starting on the nameplate page, which is incredibly daunting, I decided to jump instead into the dot grid pages. The notebook I'm using is a square size one from Archer and Olive, which is definitely one of my favorite sizes of notebook, but although this very first dot grid page on the right hand side is usable, I really wanted my first layouts in here to be on a full spread. So for that reason, I'm just going to be sticking it to the page that comes before it. Because of the way the notebooks are made, sometimes this very first dot grid page can be a little awkward to work with. It often has a little bit of glue that's securing it to that inside card, and while in some of my journal setups I have turned this first page into a pocket, I felt like I didn't really need one for the quarter ahead, so I'm just going to stick it together. If you did want to make really good use of this page though, you could turn it into some kind of motivational quote or vision board for the period ahead. I would typically set this one up to be relevant to the lifetime of the journal, so given that my journal is going to be lasting me the first quarter of next year, or 3 months, maybe I could put down a quote that summarizes how I want to come into that quarter, or what I want life to be like then. If I went with the vision board option, maybe it would be my hopes and the goals that I'm planning on working on across that 3-month period. For this setup though, I decided I wasn't going to use it and just stuck it closed. That means that heading into the first dot grid spread, the left hand side of this is going to be for my year at a glance. If you're not familiar with a year at a glance, this is effectively what it sounds like. It's just a snapshot or summary of the year as a whole, usually structured with mini calendars for each of the months of the year. There was a period during my planning and journaling where I didn't really understand the point of a year at a glance, especially because I already had those mini calendars tied to my future log, which is where I was doing my future planning. Nowadays though, I very much love having a year at a glance. I find it to be a really helpful reference that I do come back to time and time again, not only just to check what day of the week each of the days of the year falls on, but also for the week numbers. Because so much of my planning relies on the week numbers, knowing when the 4th or 26th week of the year is information that helps me structure and use my time better. For that reason, I do make sure that my year at a glance always has week numbers attached to it. But another thing that I've also changed up for my year at a glance is that I don't organize it into the months of the year anymore. This is mainly because I don't really do monthly planning, I instead do what's called cyclic planning. Similarly, I don't do a lot of annual planning, I mainly do quarterly planning, which is why this journal is going to be lasting me a quarter. For that reason though, I wanted to make changes to my year at a glance so the structure made more sense with how I like to plan. And this is one of the things that I love about setting up my own planner, is that I don't have to use pre-printed templates and structures which don't necessarily align with how I like to do my planning. From my year at a glance, even though there is heaps of page real estate in a square, and I could quite easily fit up to a year and a half or more on here, I decided just to do the 1 year, but organize each of the days of the year into the 4 quarters. With cyclic planning, all of my cycles and quarters always start on a Monday. Each cycle is 4 weeks, each quarter is 13 weeks, and that means that each of my quarters ends up with the same number of days in it. That means that my year at a glance calendar here runs from the 29th of December 2025 through to the 27th of December 2026. For some people that would probably seem a little bit odd, they'd want just the 1st of January through to the 31st of December, but because of the way that I like to do my planning and the way that the other structures in my journal work, formatting my layout in this way makes the best sense for me. While I've gone in and handwritten all of the numbers for my calendars, this is not something you have to do in setting up a year at a glance. If you wanted a time-saving option that also saved you from getting a hand cramp and a half having to write out all of the mini calendars, then we do have a free printable version of not only the quarterly system that I have here, but also the standard monthly breakdown of the year. Those free year at a glance printables are available in our free resource library, which is linked in the description box, or you can scan the QR code on screen. If you find that you have a lot of different layouts that you want to set up in your journal, or if you have a lot of layouts that rely on the mini calendar structure, it is so much simpler to just print them off, cut them out and stick them in rather than having to handwrite everything. So if you wanted to save yourself the time, effort, and energy, then those free printables are available for you. In terms of the extra space that we have outside of the calendars though, this was an opportunity to add in some decoration. I love making my journals and planners decorative because by making them nicer to look at, it just makes it more fun for me to use. And if I make the process fun and enjoyable, then I'm more likely to actually use it. If you've been around the channel for a little bit, then this theme might be familiar to you, because it's one that I actually used for my reading journal last year, but I loved it so much that I just wanted to do it again. Also, in the interest of trying to use up the supplies that I already have, kind of like a shop your stash type deal, I thought it was a good opportunity to jump back in and use this PET tape. That one is from the washi tape shop, and any of the materials I've used in the setup are also linked in the description box, just in case you're curious. In terms of timing though, from first to final touches, this page took me about 30 minutes to set up. While the time doesn't include idea generation or making my headers, it does include everything you saw in the video, though that time certainly would have been saved if I had have used my own printables. It's all good though, because that one is done, which means now it's time to get the right hand side set up, and we're bringing in a layout that I haven't used in my everyday journal for quite a while. That's mainly because back in 2022, I migrated this layout from my everyday journal into what I was calling my yearly collections journal. The idea behind that journal was that rather than having to transfer a bunch of trackers and logs partway through the year when I moved from one everyday journal into another, I would just have all of those year-long layouts in their own notebook. But with this year going all in on quarterly and cyclic planning, I just found that I wasn't really checking in with the yearly collections journal all that much. Rather than beat myself up because I wasn't using the notebook and it's like, oh, you went to all this time and effort to set it up and it's not actually getting utilized. Instead, as part of my pre-planning process, I just considered, do I still want the layouts that are in here? And if so, could I put them somewhere else so they're more likely to get used? One of those layouts was what I call the then and again layout, which is essentially just a nice and simple way to do memory keeping. In this layout, you give yourself a series of prompts that you answer at the start of your journal and then again at the end of it. So for me, that'll be the start of quarter one versus the end. In my yearly collections journal, when I was setting this collection up for a year-long time frame, that would be answering the question on the 1st of January versus the 31st of December. In picking the prompts, I always make sure to select things that I think will actually have a tendency to change. So I'm not going for things like, what's my favorite color, if my favorite color has been the same for the past 12 years, but more so things like, what's a song that I've had on repeat recently? What's a food obsession that I've recently had? I always like to include things like what's my current savings total, and also what's a goal that I recently achieved, whether it be a smaller one or something bigger. In terms of the structure of the page though, we just have those prompts running down the middle, and then on the left-hand side is where I'll answer it on the first day of using this journal, and on the right, I'll put in my responses on the very last day. By having these series of responses at these two different times, it's just a nice way to see how you've changed across a period of time, so for me 3 months or previously across an entire year, and essentially just acts as a little snapshot of what life was like for you. In terms of the full set of prompts that I decided to use, we have my savings total, my weight, a movie I recently enjoyed, a book I recently finished, a TV show I'm watching, a song that I'm kind of obsessed with and have had on repeat, a game that I recently played, something that I recently tried, something that I want to try, a recent accomplishment, a current problem, something I'm excited for, and something I'm nervous about. I didn't actually leave any space to write in when I was responding to each of these, but in knowing that I'm going to go in, use it on the very first day of using my journal, and use it again on the very last day of the journal, that information is kind of captured in the quarterly summary that we have on the left-hand page anyway, so the 29th of December versus the 29th of March. Because the setup of this one didn't actually require any handwriting from me, it only took about 15.5 minutes to set up, again with that time not including the idea generation or the pre-planning, but it is a good estimate for if you wanted to do this layout in your journal. Flipping on over though, the next layout I'll be setting up is what would typically be my quarterly overview, but I'm actually going to capture 2 quarters on here because I have ample space to do so. This is one of the fun challenges that comes from moving from a B6 journal, which is not only narrower but less tall, into a square sized journal which is decently wider and taller. I'm going to structure this one so that I have quarter one on the left hand side and quarter 2 on the right, and rather than this being a layout that I come back to time and time again to update with future plans, it's usually one that I typically mainly use at the very start of using my journal, just to get a kind of bird's eye appreciation of where my time will be going across the quarter, or across the half a year. On each page, I'm setting up a structure that has 7 columns, one for each day of the week, and 13 rows, so 13 weeks captured on each of the pages. To align with the numbering that I have on the year at a glance page from the previous spread, I'm also going to be numbering those 1 through 13 and then 14 through 26. Because there's not a lot of writing space for each of the days, I'm not going to be recording every single happening on here, and in particular, not recording anything that's really routine for me. So for instance, every Wednesday, my friends and I have a hangout. We call it the Midweek Mafia Hangout, where we go to one of our houses, that person will provide dinner, we'll do journaling, have chats. It's always a chill and very good time. But because that happens every single week, I'm not going to be capturing that on this layout. Instead, this one is going to be for those more random, more one-off or every so often things, rather than the weekly happenings. Although I do typically use it more so at the start of using my journal to get an appreciation for where my time is going to be going, it also can make for a very nice memory keeping spread, in the sense of just having a snapshot of what life was like for you in that period, especially given that it is only those kind of standout things, not the regular going-ons. It'll have things like what we did for date nights, or any social happenings and other fun events. Now, at the start of the video, I promised that if you stayed tuned, you would have the opportunity to win a notebook of your own. While I love new planner season for being able to get myself cool, calm and collected for the period ahead, I want to give you the same opportunity. So in this giveaway, 3 lucky winners are going to receive their choice of notebook from Tifosi, and to enter, all you have to do is 1. Be subscribed to the channel, because we want you to be part of our community. 2. Be sure to like the video. And 3. Leave a comment telling me one hope or goal that you have for the new year. It doesn't have to be a life-changing, earth-shattering type goal. It can be as simple as I want to spend more time with my friends or family. Or it could be something big, like publishing a novel. With those 3 steps though, subscribe, like, and leave a comment, you'll be in to win one of those 3 notebooks on offer. May the odds be ever in your favor. In terms of announcing our winners though, they'll be announced via the posts tab over on the YouTube channel. But I'll also leave it in the pinned comment on this video, just in case you don't see that one. In knowing that this season is also when sometimes the scammers like to pop their head out, I want to make it super clear that if you win one of my giveaways, I will never expect you to pay for anything. You are not expected to pay for shipping, you are not expected to buy me a $20 PlayStation 5 voucher or something. I don't know what the scammers are doing these days. But as said, the winners will be announced over in the post section on the channel, and they'll be in the pinned comment on this video. Given that each week on this layout only takes up 1 centimeter of space vertically, this meant that I had a little bit of extra space to play around with at the top and bottom of the layout to put in some decoration. Rather than going and coloring the boxes in black, which I definitely would have done previously, I made the smart decision to use washi tape instead. This meant that I could fill in the entire section with black and then lay the PET elements over the top of this to add a little bit more visual interest. This was something that I super loved from the last time I did this theme, but last time I did color in the sections with pen, and it took forever. This time around though, being older and wiser, I was much more sensible and used the washi tape to save me some time. So from first to final touches, this spread took about 35.5 minutes to set up. That time did include cutting out all of these numbers though and putting them in place, sticking them down, so if you just went and hand wrote the numbers, it probably wouldn't take quite as long. But I like the numbers. In terms of the font that I'm using for the entire of this setup, that one is called Chomsky. It's one of my favorite Gothic style fonts, so I have used it repeatedly in my journal setups, and all of these little stickers are ones that I just made myself. Essentially, I find a font that I like, I type it up in a Word document, size it appropriately for how much space I want it to take up in my journal, and then print it off on sticker paper that I cut out just using scissors and stick in. Although I have a Cricut and I was hoping to learn how to use it better this year, I kinda just haven't gotten around to that, so maybe one of my goals for next year should be learning to use my Cricut to make these little number stickers and headers. For now though, typing it up on Word and cutting it out with my regular scissors is just fine. Talking about goals though, the next layout I'm setting up is fully dedicated to these. While I do have a dedicated goal planner where I like to brainstorm my goals and plan them out in full, I also really enjoy having just a summarized list of what things I'm working on for each quarter in my everyday journal. On this one, I'm going to have a list of the goals on the left-hand side, that one just being set up with a title for the page and then the list section. On the right-hand side, this is where I schedule out when I'm going to be working on those things, just in a very kind of loose sense. Essentially, I just take the full quarter, break it down into the 13 weeks, and assign any project-based goals to those weeks. So for instance, in the current quarter, week 1 was dedicated to reorganizing my office, whereas week 2 was tackling a course that I purchased a while ago and just hadn't gotten on to actually consuming. In week 3, I was doing my second brain setup, and then in week 4, I was trialing different types of exercise. Of course, some of my goals are going to have to be worked on across the entire of the quarter. They're not just a one and done type thing, but for any of the things that are a bit more project based, I can assign them to just 1 or 2 weeks in particular. I like to use this layout to do that for myself. This isn't going to be where I plan every single step of every single goal out in full. That one's going to go in my goal planner, which we'll have a separate video on. So if you wanted to make sure that you didn't miss out on that one, subscribe to the channel, and I know that people also find it valuable to turn the notifications bell on. That means you get a heads up every time there's a new video, and with Vlogmas coming up, where we'll have a video per day on the channel for December, there is lots to look forward to. Now you may be looking at the structure of this layout thinking, that's a very large list that you're going to have there for your goals, Jess. Are you sure you're going to have that many goals? To which I would answer, yeah, probably. I'm the type of person who does enjoy having multiple things to work on at once, because I just love a pick and choose model. Much with most things in my life, when it comes to my goals, I take a follow your joy approach. So having the flexibility in what I can work on gives my brain the flexibility it needs to not feel like it's just been pigeonholed or jammed into having to work on one particular thing, and then rebelling against the idea being like, you're not my manager, you can't make me do this. By giving a choice, I'm more likely to make progress. It's good to note that although I have space for up to 25 goals on that left-hand page, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of the goals are going to be the same size. Some of them, yes, will be those long-term, work on it a little bit every single day kind of things, whereas others are going to be smaller projects. Some of them are going to require a decent amount of work, whereas others are going to feel really fun and quite easy to work on. They're just stuff that I've probably been putting off for a while, so I want to commit to having them as a goal. At this stage, I haven't selected what my goals are, especially given the fact that I do quarterly goal setting to go along with my quarterly and cyclic planning, and we're not quite close enough to the end of this quarter for me to solidly say what my goals are going to be. But I could hazard a guess that there will probably be one related to physical health, there's going to be another related to learning, there will probably be a couple to fun and leisure, and maybe one dedicated to finding a new place to live, but we'll also have a separate video on the channel talking through what I decide on. As for the right hand page though, given that this one is going to be my schedule, it does have those 13 rows for the 13 weeks of the quarter, but rather than clump them all together in one kind of larger table, I decided to separate these out so we have 4 rows for the first cycle, 4 rows for the next cycle, another 4 rows for the third cycle, and then that final row is for the 13th week, which I call reset week. This is a time that I set aside to intentionally get cool, calm, and collected for the upcoming quarter. So typically speaking, I don't put a lot of goal work in there, but more so tasks to reflect, reset, and get myself organized. In terms of timing though, this spread took about 28 minutes to set up, but it'll probably end up taking me longer to really do a thorough brainstorm of what goals I want to include on this layout. But that is not a right now us problem, because we are flipping on over and getting into more goal related layouts, but these ones being set up specifically for particular goals that I'm most likely gonna have. One of the things that I'm actively trying to do in my journaling system nowadays is make sure that my start of journal setup is very much tailored towards supporting me in working on my goals and projects. So this means keeping track of the things that are really good indicators of whether I'm kind of succeeding in my goal work, having summaries of the things that I want to do or pursue in my goal getting. And although I have not fully confirmed what my goals for next year are going to be, there are some that are pretty much assured to come up, and 2 of those areas I'm summarizing on this spread. The left hand side and half of the right hand page is just going to be dedicated to health, in particular physical health. Part of this is going to include keeping my exercise streak alive, which on the day of releasing this video, I will be 167 days strong on my exercise streak. Coming from someone who exercised maybe like 10 times last year. Having 167 days in a row is, I think it's pretty impressive. I'm very pleased with my efforts. And I know that one of the things that has held me accountable to keeping up with my exercise is thinking of it as trying to not break the chain or keeping up with a streak. I wanted to have a space in my everyday journal to acknowledge that I've kept the streak alive. So on the right-hand side of the left-hand page, this is where I'm going to have a tracker for my exercise. It'll have a little box for every day of the quarter that I can color in to say, yes, I got my exercise done. What I also hope to do is write in the number for the streak that I'm up to, but just in the off chance that before we get to the new year, I break my streak. I'm certainly hoping that doesn't happen, but just in case, I didn't want to write the numbers in advance. So essentially, every day that I keep the streak alive, I can come on in, color in the little box, and add a number to my count. If I break the chain, then, notably, that box will not get colored in, and I'll have to start back at 1. Exercise is not the only health-related thing that I will have going on though. I also wanted a spot just to outline my general health aims, so these ones aren't necessarily active goals that I'm working on, but just different aspects of health and what I hope for each of them. And also I wanted a tiny task list for anything health-related that isn't necessarily tied to a specific goal, but something I would like to do or try in pursuing better health. Another aspect of my health-related goals that has been really important for me this year is meal prepping, and in particular, prepping my breakfasts and lunches for each week. I typically try to make Sunday my designated meal prep day, and make or prepare something for me to consume across the week ahead. At the moment, I'm just on a major overnight oats kick, so I've essentially given myself a pass to have overnight oats for every single breakfast for Q4. I'm not sick of it yet, but by the time the Q1 rolls around, I might be looking for a change up. So on the left-hand side of the right-hand page, this is where I'm going to be able to record what week number it is and what meal I prepared for myself. I am eager to get back into preparing a wider variety of lunches in particular, because lunch is definitely the meal that I struggle with the most. And while I do have some good meal prep lunches that I like, I'm always on the hunt for more. This spread isn't just for my health-related things though, it is also for learning. And in particular, I've been focusing most of my learning around reading, which I do very much value and I want to continue with. So I put in a section dedicated to books, but I also wanted to consider other types of learning that I could get involved in particular watching documentaries or taking classes. I was tempted to put down courses, but I thought that that might be a bit of a commitment, especially given that this quarter I had to kind of actively make myself get in and take the course that I purchased last year, so I don't want to sign myself up to complete 2 full courses in 1 quarter. 2 classes though, that I think I could manage. I haven't specified what these books or documentaries or classes have to be about, but it's more so just considering what areas of interest I have and finding those types of sources to learn from. This full spread took about 34 minutes to set up, and I think it's one of the layouts in the setup that I'm most excited to use, mainly because I've just been really excited about keeping my exercise streak alive, and learning is something that I forever enjoy doing. As mentioned before, in retiring my yearly collections journal, I really had to go through all of the layouts I had in there and consider, do I still want them? And if I do, where are they going to be most suitable for? One of the ones I decided I wanted to keep is the layout we're going to be setting up here on the left-hand page, and that one is a savings tracker. I think that by having it in my everyday journal, I'm going to be a lot more inclined to come and check in with it, because for the one that was in my yearly collections journal, it was many moons between each of the check-ins. Thus, it didn't necessarily do a great job of holding me accountable to adding money to my savings, but by having it in this notebook, which is one that I use every day, thus it being called the Everyday Journal, it's much more likely that I'll be keeping savings top of mind, and thus hopefully across the quarter save more money. I haven't outlined specifically what my savings goal is going to be, mainly because it isn't just up to me. I need to talk with my partner Vogel about it too, and I do want to see where we get to in terms of our savings come the end of this year, before I set the goal for the upcoming quarter. I of course wanted this one to be a little bit decorative though, so I went with a nice thick border around the outside of the page, which again for this one I just used that trick of laying down the washi tape. I trimmed it back slightly so it was only 1 centimeter across, and then laid over the PET tape to add a little bit more visual interest. The actual internal structure of the page though is going to be set up using a bunch of little boxes, where each box represents a certain increment of my savings, and as I save that amount or add it to my savings account, I can just color the little box in. Once I figure out what my savings target is, I'll just divide that by 80, because I end up with 80 little boxes on here, and make it so that each of those boxes represents that increment. Because just coloring coloring in a box doesn't give you really great information about how much you saved across the quarter, I also wanted to include some individual snapshots of where my savings were sitting at the end of each cycle. So down the bottom, I'm also including some highlights to say what was my savings total on the first of the quarter, or essentially the end of quarter 4, what was it after the first cycle, after the second cycle, and then at the very end of the quarter. That way, when I come back to this page, not only can I see if I managed to hit my savings target, but also in which cycle did I add the most to my savings. Although I'm not necessarily bad at saving, I'm much more the type of person who is more likely to just go and add larger lump sums into my savings account rather than build a kind of continuous habit of adding to my savings small amount by small amount. But regardless of which way I choose to add funds to my savings, at least this layout can help me acknowledge the progress I'm making. Because this layout had a lot of ruling, it did take about 30 minutes to set up. If you went in and freehanded the boxes, it would probably take way less time. But when it comes to my start of journal setup, I don't mind spending a little bit longer to get the kind of look that I'm, well, looking for. And in terms of kind of tying into this theme, I wanted things to be quite crisp in terms of the boxes and the sections of color and any of the borders I was doing. Whereas sometimes in other themes that I do, I don't mind things feeling a little more organic or freeform. While increasing my savings is definitely going to be a goal for me, another one is going to be related to leisure. This year in particular, I got very serious about trying to manage my time in such a way that I did have downtime. I wasn't constantly working because there is always more work to do, and if I'm not careful, I will just let myself continuously work. When it comes to recording things for my leisure though, I'm not just checking a box to say yes I had it or yes it happened, but more so recording what I did to have that leisure time. For that reason, rather than just keeping this layout to a single page, I turned it into a Dutch door so that I could have 6 sections, one for the midweek mafia hangout, one for date night, one for hobby time, another for my day off, which I aim to have at least one of those a week, one for family time, and one for general social time. The purpose of the Dutch door though is so that I only have to set up the header once. This is not only a really good way to save some of your decorative materials if you have a limited stash, like I did when doing this setup, but it can also just save you the time, effort, energy that goes into putting in that decorative material, especially if it's a style of decoration that is going to take you a hot minute. By putting in the Dutch door, it meant that I only had to set up that header section once, and I can see it regardless of which way the Dutch door is turned. If you're curious about Dutch doors or some of the other techniques that I've used in this setup, I have the relevant videos linked in the description box, with those ones being more tutorial style than just setup style like we have here. So very much walking you through the process of how do you make a Dutch door, how do you make these printed headers that I'm using. But in terms of the structure of this layout, each of the different leisure type sections just gets set up as a table. The first column is going to be labeled with a W for the week number, and then the column next to this is labeled with the letter D, and that is for the day. Rather than recording the date as 28th of December or something like that, I can instead record it as week 1, day 1, or week 1, Monday. I'll probably go with week number and day number, just because then I don't have to figure out a way to distinguish between an S for Saturday and an S for Sunday, or a T for Tuesday and a T for Thursday. I know some people do an H or an R for a Thursday, but I'd probably just be more inclined to use a day number, with Monday being 1, Tuesday being 2, so on and so forth. While for the most part I will be recording an actual activity for these things, so for date night, what is the thing that we did for date night? Like, where did we go? What did we do? For family time, what was the occasion? Was it just like a hangout, a games day? Did we go out for yumcha? When it comes to the midweek mafia hangout, what I'm most likely to record here is whose house are we at? Mainly because the actual chin-chilling that happens there is very casual. I don't need to specify every single week, like, we worked in our journals, we did chat and chill, because more important information for me to know is whether I have to cook dinner or if I need to be at somebody else's house. I'm probably going to be more likely just to record whose place we're going to. When it came to figuring out the size of the sections for each of my different leisure types, I really just wanted to predict how many times across the quarter am I most likely to do this thing. When it comes to midweek mafia, this happens once per week, so 13 times across 13 weeks kind of makes sense. I already know there's going to be a couple of those weeks that I don't manage to make, but having a space for each week of the quarter will just help me better keep a schedule with whose house we're supposed to be at. A similar idea with date night. We aim to have one date per week, so having 13 entries on here, one for each of those weeks, makes sense. When it came to hobby time or a day off or family time, these sections I decided to make a little bit bigger, because although I don't typically have multiple days that I see my family every single week. When it comes to Q1, we're going to be taking a family trip to Korea and Singapore. One of the main reasons for this is because my brother is getting married, so very excited for that. But that means that at the very start of the quarter, I'm going to have a decent chunk of that section filled up with being with them as part of our trip and activities that we're doing together. When it comes to the day off, although I aim to have 1 day off per week, it would be nice to expand this to maybe 2 days off per week. And also with going on our trip, it means that I'm not going to be doing a lot of work across that period, / any work, hopefully. So those will all count as days off as well. When it comes to hobby time, I do like to have multiple hobby sessions within each week, wherever possible. So having a larger section for that makes a lot of sense. In those larger sections, I end up with 25 rows to fill in, whereas on the spaces for the midweek mafia hangout, date night, and social time, for those ones I just have 13 rows. This also meant that there was a little bit of extra space for some extra decoration, which I always appreciate having in my layouts, because it just makes them look nicer and makes it a little bit more fun to use. In terms of timing, given that this was effectively 3 pages to set up, or like 1.5 spreads, this one took about 37 minutes from first to final touches, with that time including cutting out or like removing the top section of that middle page so I could make the Dutch door, but not including typing up and printing out my headers. Now as we're 6 spreads deep into this setup, I think I have enough confidence to tackle the most daunting page, that one being the nameplate. Because it is the very first page in the journal, I always find I have this kind of like nervousness of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get in here and I'm gonna stuff it up. Definitely not helped by the number of times that I have actually stuffed up my nameplate page. Not in the sense of writing my name in wrong or anything like that, but more so just getting it not centralized or writing it in and my handwriting looking weird. This time around though, I wanted something a little decorative and tied to the theme that I was using, but I didn't want to make it too complicated for myself. So I just made a very simple kind of decorative border using some of the PET tape and some of the black washi tape. Although I was tempted to go over the top of the black washi tape again with the PET elements for that extra kind of visual interest or kind of texture, I decided to just leave it black for this one and make it so that those corner decorative pieces stood out a little bit more. Something I do wish that I had done was print off my name using the same lettering style that I used for the rest of the setup, but if it bothers me too much, I'll just go and put a white sticker label over my name and print off my name in that same lettering anyway. One of the things that has definitely made getting into my journal a little bit easier, something that kind of like calms my journal anxiety, is just remembering that pretty much any mistakes we make in here are fixable. Like, we can rebuild. We have the technology. We can stick a sticker over it, we can put a white sticker label, I could save that piece of a Dutch door and stick that over the top of something if I still wanted the dot grid. I find that just in acknowledging that if I make a mistake, I can fix it, helps make getting into my journal just a little bit easier. Now, as I'm setting this one up, just a reminder that I have 3 notebooks to give away and I want you to win one. So if you want to be in to win, there are only 3 steps. Firstly, subscribe to the channel. Second, give this video a like. And thirdly, leave a comment telling me one of your goals or hopes for next year. It doesn't have to be big, it can be something tiny. As long as you tell me what you're hoping for or looking forward to, you'll be in to win. That one will be drawn on November 22nd, announced on the posts tab on the YouTube channel, and also put in the pinned comment. Best of luck to you, and I'm excited to hear what you're hoping for next year. For me, right now, I'm mainly just hoping it's a good one. I know that in terms of my goals, I will end up with a laundry list of probably like 20 plus things that I want to work on, but I am feeling confident that the setup we have here is really going to help me get those things done, achieve the health goals that I've set for myself, hit my savings targets, and everything else. As mentioned, when it comes to setting up my journals and planners, I like to go with cyclic and quarterly planning rather than the typical annual and monthly planning that most people use. I've just found that it has been so hugely helpful in not only helping me manage my time, but also getting a better appreciation of the passage of time and getting more done in terms of the goals and projects that I'm undertaking. If you were curious about cyclic planning, we do have a video on the channel that explains why I go with that system and how it works, and that one is definitely worth checking out next. It also comes with a free calculator to help you set up your own cyclic planning system, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.